I see we're at 1 o'clock. I'm going to wait just a couple of minutes to get started. We had 91 registered, and that puts us at a little over a third. So we'll see if a few more folks join. And I was getting ready to say I need to wait on our board chair to help me kick it off, but he's here now, so no excuses.
Yes, I'm here now. I got held up at lunch, and so I was almost late.
All right, there's my threshold. I was figuring about the time we had at least half of the number of registered people, we'd go ahead and start. And with that, I will say good afternoon and welcome to the KanREN annual meeting 2021. And resize my content so I can put all of you out of the way of that slide. This is a pretty interesting annual meeting for us. You know, we for the last several years we've done kind of a 2 to 4 hour kind of business meeting without a lot of separate presentations for several years. And look at us here, and hopefully what's the tail end of the pandemic, kind of bringing that back to inching ourselves back into a full conference. So I'm ecstatic to have you all here. We've got some great content this time. And if you've been here for past annual meetings and you're wondering, no, you don't have to listen to me the whole time. Actually, you don't have to listen to me much at all this year. And because I'm a little paranoid and using a new feature in Keynote for a presentation, someone please nod and let me know that the content is coming through okay. Awesome.
Yep, you're good.
Okay. So just some housekeeping, logistics, help, information stuff up on the screen now before we get in. We are trying to push the discussion and conversation during the presentations into our Slack channel. So there's some stuff in the Zoom chat with Slack. We're trying to not have those conversations in the Zoom chat and keep it clear for things like, oh, all of a sudden I can't hear you anymore, presenter, stuff like that. And the Zoom session will remain up during breaks. So we've got several breaks during the day today, and later when there's the member-only business meeting, we're going to keep the regular Zoom session up and going and hope that folks stick around and find some fun stuff to talk about. Making fun of those of us in the business meeting is fine. And another thing, if you could please add your institution name to your name in Zoom. If you don't know how to rename yourself, oh boy, it's not on my screen now. So in participants, if you open participants and mouse over your name, there'll be a more box to the right. You can drop down and rename. we'd really appreciate it if you could put your institution you represent next to your name in here. So not as much for us, but for everyone else. That way we all know where everybody's from. That would be fantastic. Another thing kind of new for us this year, let's get social this year. We're trying to get a little bit of traction on social media going on. There's been some stuff in the chat already on that. And the driver for this is you could win some fun stuff if you actually get social with us. It's the hashtag and KanREN on popular social media platforms. I did want to take this opportunity to invite our board chair this year, Mark Griffin, the CIO of Fort Hays State University, to say a few things also to welcome us to the meeting today.
Yeah, thank you, Cort. Basically, just wanted to welcome everybody here. We've got our annual meeting, which is very similar to what you've seen in the past, except now it's on Zoom. And then we've gone back to having, I guess, more of a conference type get together that Cort and his staff have put together. And I'm really looking forward to seeing those presentations and everything they have in store for us there. And I look forward to some of the discussions that every one of you will bring to the table today too. So welcome again.
And you caught me taking a drink. Okay, so some stuff today. We're going to kind of roll right from one session to the next. There's ample breaks during the day. But when we go from session to the next in the agenda, you see one pretty much picks up where the other left off. I will be around to kind of MC and shuffle us through these things, but we're going to go pretty fast between them. Also note that the breaks are kind of strategically placed, and even the end of the day today, to leave some time at the end of the day and in the break. So if there's a good conversation going on, the member success stories either come up right against the break or at the end. Please feel free to stay around and stay in here during the break and keep the conversation going if you want, or at the end of the day, we'll be around for about another half hour. So good stuff there. And let's see, looking at the chat. Yep, we see I see we've got the Slack link going out. So we've got folks joining in there. If you have trouble, KanREN staff is hanging out. We are hanging out in the Slack channel. All of them actually. If you do have an issue and the only way you can get us is a Zoom chat, you might grab a staff member if you can on direct message in there, or any other technique you can use to get a hold of us. We're also doing live transcription today for anyone that might benefit from those subtitles. You can turn that off. At the bottom of your screen, there is a CC icon and live transcription. You can click on that and turn the subtitles off if that's distracting for you. And we're just a little bit early to get started on the first presentation, but I was actually kind of hoping that we would get into things a little bit early if our ops team is ready. And I guess I should say, anybody have, when I'm talking, you're always welcome to interrupt me with a question if you want. If you don't want to speak up here and interrupt me though, like especially during the business meeting, there will be KanREN staff in the Slack channel that will pick up questions that come in, and I've asked them to interrupt me so I'm not so distracted. I think a lot of our presenters will probably do that. So look for those staff members in there. They'll be interacting, and then they can bring the questions up here. Anybody have any questions? Anything you don't have before we get started?
Not hearing anything, Cort. I think I'll go ahead and start. Give me just a second to get this shared.
And by the way, I'd love to see more video tiles on here. For those of you not sharing video, I'm not going to hassle you about it too much, but would love to see your faces. There's a number of you I've talked to, but have never met in person.
Okay, can somebody confirm for me just real quick that you can see our presentation?
You're good.
Great. All right. Well, the operation just wanted to kind of talk to you a little bit about what we've been working on and what we have coming up. It would probably work best if questions go into chat, and we should have a few minutes at the end since Cort was so short. Our team consists of myself and Indika McCampbell and Jamie Jeffers. We're a total of 2.5 FTE. This year, one of the things that came up for us was not being in the same geographic location. We learned that common contact information is really helpful for us. So contacting us at info@kanren.net whenever possible really helps us handle your requests. One of the primary functions of our team is handling service requests. This includes upgrades, changes, new business. In FY20, we had 111 total requests, and for this year, we've had 123. That's about a 10% increase, and we expect that to be even larger for FY22. Indika picks these up from the initial request through implementation. And what you see here in that pending category is the 27 requests she currently has open and is constantly juggling to make sure they get taken care of. Here we've broken this down into service areas. We're continuing to see increases, but in particular this year, the connectivity opportunity increases were due to backbone member renewals. And then Net Plus, which includes Zoom, looked like it decreased a little, but we're mid-contract cycle for that. So everything included in FY21 is all new business or increases. We're also excited to see more members taking advantage of network protection services, and we hope that more people can utilize that. Indika handles the processes for opportunities through implementation, and then Jamie picks those up for us on the accounts payable and accounts receivable side. A big part of this is managing USAC programs and making sure that those deadlines are met, forms are completed, reimbursements are processed. The majority of our members now benefit from either the E-rate program or HCF. And those programs comprise of almost half of our total revenue. So obviously staying on top of all of that is critical for our organization. We're continuing to work on streamlining and automating our processes to make best use of consortium resources. We're always trying to strike the right balance between accommodating member needs and finding the areas where there's commonality that can reduce resource use. This year, we asked for and appreciated your ability to work with us on changing our Zoom ordering to monthly rather than just as needed. That single change really helped us with processing and billing changes. And then we continue working on syncing contracts to the fiscal year boundary where possible. We're continuing to reduce the time spent on invoicing by suggesting annual billing and reducing the number of one-off invoices. For E-rate members, a critical piece of this is submitting paperwork early. That allows your funding commitment decision letters to come out before the new fiscal year starts. And that allows us to bill you on a normal schedule without having to do those as a one-off type of scenario. With that, I'm going to turn over to Indika, who is going to talk a little bit more about services and the processes she uses.
Good afternoon, everyone. So yeah, we've got, obviously, as many of you are aware, several groups of services. KanREN provides network and related services targeted to meet the needs of research, education, and other community anchor institutions in Kansas. You are aware that our backbone points of presence are the Regents Universities, JCC, and we have some key locations in the Kansas City area that we're expanding as well. For connectivity, we offer broadband internet service through our partner providers at this time. And obviously, we're always focusing on increased uptime and reliability, as well as bringing you the best possible cost options for these services. Security is obviously a growing need. We've, I think, seen a lot more questions and information requests come in for this past year. We offer managed security services at this time, network protection services through our firewall service, DDoS mitigation, which is included in your connectivity, as well as remote vulnerability scanning and Akamai services at different levels based on the size of the member and obviously your requirements. We still have some cloud services that we offer through StormCellar Cloud Storage Service. We have some data backup options and virtual machine options that some of our members use. So if you have any questions on these, definitely reach out to me through info@kanren.net. And I mean, Zoom obviously has been a increasingly growing need this past year for everyone. And we have a consortium-wide partnership with Zoom where we can offer some really good pricing for Zoom resources to our members. We also have some contracted and reseller partnerships. The two biggest ones are probably VMware and Akamai. And these basically allow you to get some good discounts through KanREN versus retail pricing that you could probably just get out at the open market. So for all of these services, and I didn't go into too much detail because I know we'll be covering quite a bit of that in separate presentations, and we'll also have some service documents that we'll be presenting out later through the year. This is kind of a lot of what I do. When you send a request to info@KanREN, the first thing that I do, so assuming you wanted, an upgrade option or connectivity options, I will go out and talk to our partners and get different quote options. Now, you may have one quote, you might have several quotes depending on what you're looking for. These are just options. You can kind of review them with your team and then decide which one you want to move forward with. And once you decide, okay, we want this particular option and the terms are good, we will then sign off on a service addendum. This is actually the legal contract. So it's kind of a two-part process. You have the options and then you sign off on the legal contract, and that's signed off by both parties. So Cort signs off and then the approved signer at your organization will sign off. If you are a new KanREN member, you also will have to sign off on a membership agreement, which is kind of the overarching document that covers all of your membership details. We are working to do annual service memorandums for all of our members. This basically is a summary of services that you have with us. And if needed, we can do them twice a year. So if you do require that for your budgeting purposes, just let us know, again, through info, and then we can generate that and send that to you. It's kind of a good snapshot of everything that you have, especially as things change often. So those are kind of the documents that you will likely see coming from me more often than not and working with you on these documents. And then once all of the document process is done, technical implementation begins. And once that's completed, then I hand it off to Jamie for invoicing.
Thank you, Indika. Hello, everyone. I'm going to share just a little bit about what you can expect when it comes to our invoicing process. KanREN operates on a fiscal year, which runs July 1st through June 30th. We do default to an annual invoicing schedule, but we can accommodate quarterly invoicing should that suit your institution's need better. If you make service changes throughout the year and you've already been invoiced annually, you can expect to receive a supplemental invoice that includes the added services only. If you have opted for a quarterly invoice, you can expect to receive the invoice on the next quarter's invoice once implementation has been completed. KanREN also provides several services at zero cost to you. Typically, these services are not listed on the quotes or service addendum contracts, but will be detailed on your invoices. Periodically, we receive inquiries about paying for services with credit card or via ACH. We are always reviewing these options, but at this time, KanREN is not set up to receive credit card payments. However, if your organization uses the Kansas Smart Portal, we are listed as a vendor you can choose to pay via ACH within that portal. Another aspect of invoicing process is related to the two federal programs that KanREN participates in. Those are the E-Rate and Healthcare Connect programs, both of which are administered by USAC. For both programs, KanREN is considered the service provider, and as such, we have our own set of rules and procedures to follow. The E-Rate program, which applies to school districts and libraries, offers two methods for reimbursement for your eligible technology services. Those are SPI or BEAR. KanREN defaults to the SPI method. This means that KanREN discounts your invoices based on the funding percentage E-Rate has committed to, and we only invoice you for the portion of your services for which you are responsible. On the back end, KanREN submits the SPI form directly to USAC to obtain the reimbursement of the discount we applied on your invoice. The BEAR method is the applicant form used to invoice USAC for E-Rate discounts on a retroactive basis. If the BEAR method were used, KanREN's invoice to you would reflect the full cost of services. You then are responsible to pay the full amount and file the BEAR form to receive reimbursement from USAC yourself. Defaulting to annual invoicing and using the SPI method benefits KanREN members by eliminating paperwork and, most importantly, reduces the financial burden of paying the gross amount of the invoice before reimbursement can take place. The second program, Healthcare Connect Fund, or HCF, applies to specific institutions whose sites offer healthcare services or education and meet a certain set of criteria. You can find out more information on specifics of HCF eligibility on USAC's website. The reimbursement process for eligible HCF participants is similar to the E-Rate BEAR method. Your institution pays KanREN in full for their services, and you file a form with USAC, which we receive for authorization and approval. Once the form is certified and KanREN has received the funding, we quickly turn around and issue your institution a check for the funding you are eligible to receive. Currently, the HCF process is being reviewed within KanREN's Finance Committee to ensure a smooth process and promote further participation to those who may be eligible. So that's just a brief rundown of what you can expect when it comes to paying for your KanREN services. So up next, coming soon, KanREN's member community. Hopefully, most of you received our introductory newsletter a few weeks ago. Moving forward, you can expect to receive those on a monthly basis. They're designed to be more informative and provide regular updates on all things related to the KanREN Consortium. If for some reason you did not receive the newsletter and you would like to make sure that you don't miss out on those in the future, you can reach out to us at info@kanren.net or via the contact form on our website, and we'll make sure we have your contact information in our system. For KanREN members that engage in member-to-member communication via the reps or tech reps listserv, KanREN will be phasing that out and replacing it with a dedicated Slack channel. To ensure that you remain involved in and receiving those communications, you can send a request to info@kanren.net with Slack in the subject line, and we will respond with an invitation to join. And don't forget, like Cort mentioned, we're trying to be more active on social media. So if you like us, comment or use hashtag KanRENannualmtg21 during the conference, you'll be entered to receive some extra KanREN swag. So hit those social platforms and join the conversation.
Thanks, Jamie.
Yes.
We're also going to continue working on connectivity at all levels in the coming year and developing those services. We have heard and are listening that backup and redundancy are needed by many of you. And on the smallest end, we would really like to have a service available to those of you with a very, very small number of users. And we're trying to stay agile. We know that there are lots of funding programs that are coming, and we want to be ready to provide you with any kind of documentation you need and meet those requests, as well as anticipating that KanREN may be initiating some of those requests internally and being able to provide that internal support as well. With that, I think we can take any questions if there are any.
You know, one thing this would be a good time for, and I blew it earlier in my happiness that Keynote added a present in window mode. I screwed up getting my speaker notes available to me and did not talk about what Jamie picked up with our mailing list moving to Slack. So thank you, Jamie. But specifically, that's come up here. We're trying to move our email stuff more towards distribution only, like maintenance notifications, move the conversations to Slack. And then our newsletter that one newsletter has gone out so far. That's going to be the primary way we communicate what's going on at KanREN in the future. So please get signed up for our newsletter if you haven't. We are not going to spam you with a bunch of junk. We are going to send hopefully only the kind of things that we would have historically put out through our old email lists. The email list will stay active for a while, but they're going to kind of go to KanREN staff, who will send a polite reminder that, hey, we're moving this discussion to Slack, and we'll forward those messages on. But around the beginning of the fiscal year, we plan to shut those lists down. Sorry for missing that earlier. So you can ask questions or make comments about that too. Well, we are moving fast today and not a lot of questions. So we've got a little bit of time. The next session was not scheduled to start until 1:45 and run to 2, but I have a feeling the folks from Johnson County Community College who are about to present probably would have no problem using a little over 15 minutes. I think we were a little bit worried that one wasn't going to be enough. If you guys would like to start a little bit early and maybe have a little bit more time, I think we can, if you'd like to do that, we can go ahead and start.
Sure, we'd like to talk.
So next session is Johnson County Community College member success with their cloud adoption. We say member success in the context of KanREN because we think that KanREN had something to do with helping that success. And Martin going to be with you today?
Yeah, I think Martin's out there.
So we have Matt Holmes and Martin Huerter from JCCC. Take it away, guys.
Awesome, thanks. All right, everybody see my screen okay? Hopefully that made it across. And Martin, you're out there. Just want to make sure we can hear you.
now I'm unmuted. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Awesome.
All right.
Thanks. So just like probably many of you, Martin is off campus today and I am on campus. So we're taking advantage of our Zoom, just like many of you probably are throughout your day-to-day work. So Cort asked us to present a little bit about our cloud adoption here at the college, and it's a pretty good story. Martin and I have been working on this probably since Martin first started at the college. So a little bit about us. Martin's been at JCCC for 10 years now, going on 11. And before that, he was at KU for 22 years, and he serves as our network architect here at the college. I serve as the director of network and data center operations. So my team takes care of a lot of the infrastructure. And of course, we work really close with KanREN on any of our connectivity needs here for internet and our remote sites. And they've always been a really great partner when it comes to working through some of these things like, trying to determine whether we should move something to the cloud or not. What would that impact be to our infrastructure? So we'll just kind of jump in here and talk a little bit about our journey over the past 5 or 6 years. So we started initially with migrations to the cloud sort of happening organically. We had moved a few things out to the cloud. Of course, student email was something that we got off premise very early on in the early 2000s. And over that initial, 10 years between 2000 and 2010, things would move to the cloud as they sort of needed to. Employee email was something we were working on right before 2015. And we had done quite a bit of analysis, a lot of cost analysis on whether it was more cost effective to run it on premise or off premise and host it in Microsoft O365 or perhaps in Google. And through that analysis, we also had an information services audit. And one of the things that they identified was that we were sort of missing a cloud strategy. So we really didn't have a defined strategy or process around what we would do with cloud and how we would utilize the cloud. So in 2015, we really started in earnest to develop an actual cloud strategy. And what came out of that was a methodology and kind of a framework, which we called Cloud First Strategy. And the thrust of that was basically that we would really look at the cloud first and whether that would be a viable solution and run that through some analysis to determine what would be a good fit, whether it be software as a service or a hosted opportunity or something of that nature. So once we had that framework in place, we started identifying some of the impacts to the infrastructure. So one example was our employee email. And we were thinking about synchronizing these large mailboxes, and that really wasn't an issue on premise, but we were kind of concerned about what would happen to our internet connection if all of a sudden we had thousands of large mailboxes trying to be synchronized all the time with Outlook clients on campus, and did quite a bit of analysis around that. And some of the things that came out of that was that we knew we would be using more bandwidth and likely the patterns of that usage would change pretty dramatically. So we looked at plans to upgrade our internet border hardware, that infrastructure from the border routers to the border firewalls and our core network switching and routing. So we also looked at some of the shortcomings that we had with our outdoor fiber plant and started to develop a plan to upgrade some of that infrastructure as well. The thing that was interesting about 2015 compared to where we are today is, when we went through this analysis and we developed our our strategy, we had probably 80% of our applications were hosted in our own data centers. So that shift happened pretty fast for us over the next 5 years. So again, once our strategy was in place and we had these processes, we started migrating applications, and that just became an operational exercise for us. Mission continuity was always a focus around that, and likely a driver for whether we decided to move something into the cloud. A lot of times when we went through our analysis, it became obvious that it was going to be very expensive for us to maintain a disaster recovery operation and duplicate hardware, or basically manage all that infrastructure for disaster recovery on our own versus moving it out to the cloud. So this once cloud migrations became operational, the employee email was one of the first things that really was completed pretty quickly, and Microsoft Office 365 was adopted. So again, all of those other great applications out there, Teams and SharePoint and all of those things were eventually adopted as well. But once that was done, our focus shifted over into our ERP system and our student information systems. And as we went through that analysis, we looked at Banner, and it was evaluated. And again, just like I said earlier, with the disaster recovery aspects of it, it became pretty obvious that trying to maintain a disaster recovery environment for our Banner environment was going to be very difficult and pretty expensive. So we evaluated that, and it was approved for migration, and we migrated to Elosian hosted services in Amazon Web Services. And again, we kind of tapped on KanREN's shoulder there a little bit just to make sure that we would have good connectivity. Elosian hosts their environment in Ashburn in Virginia. So we knew that there would be a difference in that experience, and we wanted to make sure that that was going to be as good as it possibly could be, given the distance. So we made it through that migration. Then our learning management system followed closely after that. We had Angel hosted on premise, and we moved to Canvas online. Our college website and our single sign-on services, we migrated those to Amazon Web Services. And we had other on-premise workloads that we moved either to Azure or AWS, kind of depending on what their requirements were. So we've really kind of got just about every kind of flavor you can imagine when it comes to cloud adoption. We've got hosted applications, we've got software as a service, we've got infrastructure as a service, and then we've got some things that we've built and maintained ourselves in kind of a hybrid configuration between on-premise and the cloud. So kind of continuing along here, as we worked through all these application migrations, we also worked in parallel on our infrastructure upgrades. So we completed our border router upgrades. So we went from 1 gigabit connections to 10 gigabit connections to the internet, and upgraded our firewall and campus core to be able to handle multiple 10 gig connections for that. We also developed a 5-year plan to completely replace and document our campus outside fiber plant. And that whole process of, basically rebuilding our entire fiber plant took about 5 years, and we wrapped it up here and just recently, like within the past few months. This involved building a new campus ring of fiber, and it provided redundant connections of diverse fiber for off campus and to each of our buildings. So again, kind of following along that line of disaster recovery and mission continuity, trying to keep all that infrastructure up and able to handle all of the different needs for the communication paths. So again, we kind of fast forward to today, and we've got close to 90% of our applications are hosted in the cloud. We've got a handful of applications on premise, and a few things that are in a little bit of a hybrid configuration. So it's been a pretty big shift over 5 years to go from basically 80% of our stuff on-prem to almost 90% now in the cloud. It's almost flipped, completely. Another big driver we've had here recently, before we jump into Martin's content here, and he's got some good diagrams to kind of talk a little bit about the infrastructure. We've been working with disaster recovery and mission continuity for the past couple of years, and so business impact analysis has been completed for a lot of departments on campus, and what that gave us was good information for RTOs and RPOs for what they expected for their applications. And so it really helped us hone in on whether we were on the right path or not for cloud adoption. And then of course, what our upcoming needs were going to be for accommodating disaster recovery efforts for some of these on-premise applications. So we're looking at infrastructure needs to handle bandwidth for replication or moving large sets of data off campus for backups and recovery purposes. And then some workloads, of course, are running in a hybrid configuration now, like Active Directory, so we can keep servers on premise and in Azure and AWS to provide that mission continuity. So one of the things that we've been working on with KanREN here, as I hand it off to Martin, we've been looking at really extending our data centers into the cloud. And so one of the services that KanREN has been able to help us with and bring forward is a service that Internet2 offers called Cloud Connect, where we can create AWS Direct Connect and Azure Express routes to basically make our campus data centers and our workloads in Amazon and Azure appear, as they're all one big data center. So Martin will jump into some of the logistics around that and go through the diagrams.
Yeah, well, Matt put together a good story on what our drivers were to shift a lot of applications off-prem. And as you can see in this diagram here, our concern or our problems were just like everyone else's. You had these remote cloud services that were kind of out there in the ether. And as far as traffic and performance and whatnot, you were kind of blind, so to speak, on what was going on with your traffic. So when we would have users or sysadmins come up to us and say, we got a latency issue or this or that. Well, it's tough to, with all these nebulous networks in between you and your cloud service, it was difficult to pin down. We looked at some things like Thousand Eyes, they have probes, they have agreements with a lot of different carriers and cloud services and whatnot providers to give us an idea where the problem could be, but it really it wasn't a solution, so to speak. Then Cort and Brad and Casey started talking to us about this new thing that I2 is producing. It was called Cloud Connect. And basically what was happening was AWS and Azure and Google all made agreements with Internet2 to peer directly with Internet2. So we had KanREN gave us, or I2 gave us essentially two options, KanREN/I2. We could peer with KanREN, and then they would VLAN a transport to us to the cloud or to Internet2, and then directly to the cloud providers. So, and the other option was that JCC could peer directly with I2, and I think they called that a layer 3 VPN. Or Brad can, I don't know if you can chime in on that. I think that's a layer 3 VPN is what it was referred to. So it's
You're correct.
okay.
Sorry.
It's no problem. Essentially, that made JCC look like we're BGP pairing directly with the internet too, and so we created multiple VLANs. Go ahead and go to the next slide there, Matt. Okay. Initially, KanREN stood up a service for us, or directed us on how to stand up the service for us. They really held our hands through this whole process. And basically what we did was we established a peer with the KC or Internet 2 KC location, the POP downtown Kansas City. So we were peering directly with them. We created a couple VLANs, one VLAN from one of our data centers and one VLAN from another one. And then KanREN would stack that VLAN tag and then transport it to Internet 2, and then it would peel off and it looked like we were directly peering with Internet 2. So we by doing it that way, we eliminated a lot of concern as far as encryption, transport and whatnot. So in essence, logically, it looks like JCC is peering directly with Internet 2 as far as these cloud services connections. We had concerns about having this one connection to the KC Internet 2 or GPN POP location, and so KanREN got on the stick and worked out a deal to get an Internet 2 peering session down in Tulsa, Oklahoma, through Wichita State. So in essence, now if you look at those green traffic patterns, JCC will goes through the Grand Avenue, 1102 Grand POP, then on down to Walnut, where the GPN / Internet 2 connection is. And then also we're peering directly with that connection in Tulsa. So recently we just upgraded our VLAN infrastructure. So now we have 2 VLANs that go from one of our data centers to KC POP, the other data center also to the KC POP, and then two VLANs to the POP down in, or to the location down in Tulsa. So now we have all kinds of redundancy. We have high-speed connections. You can see JCC is still connected to KanREN at 210 gig connections right now, but we're working on changing that. So now we have, for example, we have a users or sysadmins come up to us and say, we've got a latency problem. Now we can test our connectivity from JCC clear to Internet 2. And if we don't see any latency, then we know it's within AWS or Microsoft Azure or Google infrastructure, and address it in that fashion. So it kind of simplifies things for us and gives us predictability and robust connectivity for our mission critical applications. As you can see down there on the list, Matt named off several of them, but without availability on those, we would be in a terrible way. And also too, I think Matt mentioned, I don't know if Matt mentioned it or not, we've got a lot of clients, Microsoft clients on campus, that, a lot of patching and a lot of maintenance and whatnot generates a lot of traffic over this path as well. So it it really simplified things for us. And without KanREN's support and help on this, we would have never been able to get this. And also too, they pushed hard to get the Tulsa connection for us. Well, not for us, for KanREN members, but addressed our concerns, and which was going to be everybody else's concerns as others migrate to this service as well. So it really wasn't terribly difficult to establish and stand up and make connections and whatnot. The hardest part was all the stuff the folks that use the services have to do. So so it's a no-brainer for us, and it was easy to do. So go ahead and go to the next slide, Matt.
Yep. The one thing I wanted to also put a plug in for too, while we're kind of talking through some of that, and our applications, with so many of them being in the cloud, it did really change the traffic patterns between on campus and the internet. And that was another thing that KanREN was able to show. The graphing and the traffic analysis that they do is pretty in-depth and can really help with capacity planning. The traffic changed from, what we would typically see in the past, like 5 years ago, lots of download activity, to lots of bursty activity, both in and out of campus. So you can really attribute that to all of the ways that these applications work in the cloud and the different clients, whether it be a mobile client or a desktop application. The way that they transmit data really changed the pattern on campus quite a bit. And KanREN was able to show us that and help us with capacity planning and making sure our infrastructure was in a good place to handle that.
Yeah. So this diagram here illustrates the peering Cloud Connect's location. So they've got a lot of redundancy and diverse paths and whatnot built into the Cloud Connect. So as far as redundancy and high availability, and for something like a remote data center, as Matt mentioned, we also JCCC's design is we have an access layer in our network, which is where all of our data center infrastructure resides, and then also our user domain. So there's kind of two pockets of distribution. It's our data center and our users, and then they all connect to an intersection we refer to as the core. And since we were able to do our peering directly from our core to Internet 2, it looks like we're about as close to our data center to Internet 2 peering, and then right into cloud services that as that's about as good as you can get, and it takes a lot of guessing and a lot of blindness out of this traffic. So to us, it looks like our data center is almost directly connected to Internet 2, and then of course Internet 2 is directly connected to the cloud providers. So that kind of wraps that up as far as my point goes. If there's anything anybody else want, Brad or Cort or Matt, if you want to add anything else to the discussion.
Thanks, Martin. I think that kind of sums it up. Really great partnership, and our cloud adoption has really been helped a lot by all the technical expertise at KanREN.
You should never invite me to talk more. There is one thing I want to bring up here. That Tulsa connection, that's also an example of why working outside of just Kansas and being part of our regional community is so important. That connection to Tulsa was done in a partnership with GPN. GPN has some other GPN members have legitimate need to get through that way. And that provides GPN a way to connect its two POPs together without being dependent upon Internet 2's infrastructure. So it was kind of a match made in heaven when we were able to obviously something that we really needed as a second exit point, but then to have those partners within GPN and the other GPN members to help pay for it. That was a fantastic opportunity for all of us.
Yeah.
Cort?
Well, one of the reasons why in our conversations here at JCC, we didn't mention GPN very much is because KanREN does all that brokering for us. So they do all the heavy lifting for us so GPN, as far as JCC and KanREN's conversations, is almost non-existent because they do all of that for us. Well, they do a lot of other things for us too. They deal with a lot of other headaches for us as well. So, it's
Martin, I think that's exactly how it should be. I'm James with GPN, but I wanted to interject and say that your all's work here in K-States and others in Kansas have really improved the state of the Cloud Connect services nationally. I think I can't say enough about KanREN and especially Brad Fleming and others who have helped massage the whole process with Internet or Two. I can tell you behind the scenes, your efforts have made it so much simpler for everybody else. In fact, the tools that are delivered to make that happen have been improved because of these interactions. So if you've ever run into any bumps, I don't know if you ever did or if they were already solved by the team, but we've all benefited from it. So Brad's been involved in our INTAC, and we get to hear about some of the processes on the I2 side, and we all get to benefit from how much simpler it is. And so we're seeing more folks doing these types of things. But I just wanted to interject and say thank you, because you've made it better for the rest of us.
Yeah, well, again, Brad and Casey and Cort and the whole KanREN gang has made this seamless for us. And without them, we could have never accomplished this. So it's a big pat on the back for KanREN and their staff. So.
Yeah, I like the fact we're plowing new ground and that some of our work has helped the community, James. So I'm happy to hear that. We try to be out on the ahead of some of what we see coming down the line, and for sure we see more dependence on this type of connectivity, especially as things move into a kind of a hybrid configuration between workloads on premise and in the cloud. So we're looking forward to what the next steps are in evolving the infrastructure.
Yeah, we all here in Kansas, we know JCCC is huge. We know they're a big player, but it was really fun for me, and I'm guessing Brad as well, to watch when Internet 2 rolled that service out. We were an early adopter, and it was JCCC at the front of it with K-State not too far behind. It was kind of fun being on and I see Linda Ruse from Internet 2 down there in my video. It was kind of fun being on the national calls with some of the larger universities in the country. Mm-hmm. And talking about Kansas and oh yeah, community college was so early to the game. It was made me proud.
Yeah. Well, also I wanted to reach out to any other KanREN members if they have a desire to talk about this more in depth or talk about our experiences more. We're just like Cort, and we like to talk. So reach out to us. I think everybody knows, or if you don't know how to get a hold of us, Cort, Brad, in case you know how to get a hold of us. So any questions you have or any concerns or whatnot, don't hesitate to reach out to us.
Well, thank you guys. This worked out perfectly. You brought us up to right about time for our first break. We're doing some a little bit longer breaks. I know everyone gets tired of back-to-back Zoom, so we're going to give a little bit more time here. We're coming up on our first break. For KanREN members, this will be a half-an-hour break, and we'll reconvene in the other Zoom link that you were sent at 2:30 for our annual business meeting. For non-members who are here, you've got either an hour-and-a-half break, or we're going to keep this Zoom session up and running. If you want to hang out here and talk during the break or hang out while we're having the meeting, like I said earlier, make fun of us, you're welcome to do that. So I'm going to stay here. I think we're going to be around to keep this up and running. So feel free to hang out here, have some side conversations, meet up on Slack, or just get up and stretch your legs. plenty of time to drive down to the quick shop and grab a drink. And KanREN members, see you back here in half an hour. And I hope non-members come back later in the day. We've got some really good content after that meeting with after the, well, actually, yeah, more than that, I should say, hour and 45 minutes. We've got another short break after the the business meeting. I need to slow down. And then we'll be, I didn't really bill it as such, but we have our keynote presentation. Stanley Adams from the State Office of Broadband Development will be here to talk to us about institutional broadband needs and what's going on at the state office and what we can do to help him. Followed up by another member success story that I'm really looking forward to, and a little bit of an early wrap up to the day. So 2 o'clock. See you guys in a half an hour or an hour and 45 minutes.
And because we just got done talking about Cloud Connect, if you don't care about taking a break, I have a whole slide deck that I did just for Cloud Connect because Linda Roos from Internet2 was nice enough to send me theirs, and I completely stole a bunch of images. So I will share those with you for anybody that wants to forego their break. You're welcome to get up and leave. I won't be offended if I see people walking around in the background. I'll just assume you have your speakers turned up really loud and can still hear me. All right, I gotta remember the order of operations to actually run a slideshow on here, sorry. That's not it.
Hey, Brad, what software are you using?
I'm also using Keynote and probably better figure this out before tomorrow.
Yeah, up on the menu bar at the top under play, instead of the normal play button, do play in window and it won't mess up your display in Zoom.
Yeah, I think we are officially using different versions of Keynote because I don't have that option. So you guys are going to get to see all the slides, whatever. We're pretty informal here, obviously, and I'll figure out the actual real presentation for tomorrow. So again, thanks to Linda Roos for giving me you guys' slide deck. Hopefully you guys can see all this stuff. So Cloud Connect is a service / product from Internet2 that allows you to today to get connected to kind of the back door of the big 3 cloud providers, you know, the infrastructure, the service providers that we all know as AWS, Azure, and GCP, Google Cloud Compute, whatever you want to call it. There's work happening to try and get to others in the future, but right now it's those big 3 that you guys are probably already fairly familiar with as far as infrastructure as a service offerings. These services are offered at no additional cost for KanREN members, and that's to be very specific, that's no additional cost from KanREN, no additional cost from GPN, no additional cost from Internet2. If you lay in these services, though, you will almost for sure get a cost on the cloud side. So you will have an additional bill, additional line item added to your bill with your AWS side of the fence for the virtual port and the bandwidth on that side. So keep that in mind if you're looking at this type of service. Unfortunately, there's nothing completely for free out there. And even though it seems like getting that bandwidth off of public side connections would actually be good for these guys, they still want to figure out a way to charge you for it. So. And the purpose, obviously, of Cloud Connect is to extend your data center, your campus into those infrastructure as a service environments without the need for public side, you know, without having to go through your border firewalls, border routers, eat up internet side bandwidth, and potentially you can also forego a lot of your super expensive encryption hardware if your policy allows that data to traverse without being encrypted in an IPsec tunnel, for example. And yeah, if you've ever heard any of these things from one of these cloud providers, each one of them calls it something different just to make it more confusing and difficult to know what you're buying. AWS calls it Direct Connect, Azure calls it Express Route, and GCP calls it, I believe, Dedicated Connection. That's from memory, but if you've ever heard a vendor talking about those types of connections, this is all the same thing. Internet2 is just the carrier that can provide you that type of connection in this case. Connection points are just like, this is obviously the exact same map that the Johnson County guys presented for us just a minute ago. These connection points and speeds are probably just a little bit out of date because I know Internet 2 is constantly looking to upgrade these and add another 10 gig here to keep up with demand, or upgrade this 10 gig to 100 gig, or these types of things. So, and with Internet 2 is going through a massive evolution of their network at the same time, where 100 gig ports are significantly more plentiful now than they were back in the day. So you may actually find that there's way more capacity, but this is baseline capacity in each one of these metropolitan areas. If you want to get connected to your favorite cloud, if that's AWS and you want to get to Ashburn, there's a lot of physical connectivity out there. So we can probably meet just about any need that you have using Cloud Connect / Direct Connect into AWS. Connection models are fun. This is where you kind of get to start making some decisions on how everything is going to plug together and work. There's a very simple kind of layer 2 model where KanREN builds a layer 2 path across our core from the edge of your network into the edge of the GPN network. GPN then switches your traffic through at layer 2 as well. And then Internet 2 builds a layer 2 MPLS service across their network to the edge of the cloud. So this is layer 2 all the way from the edge of your data center or border all the way to the edge of the cloud provider, which can be advantageous. There's a few caveats, meaning all that traffic is going to have to come back to your main campus in this scenario. And you start to run into some scalability problems, specifically if you have more than one cloud connection to the world. Maybe that's AWS in Chicago because you want to be in Ohio, and you also want to have a connection in Dallas. Well, now you've got to have 2 connections and 2 BGP sessions with the cloud. And if you want those to be redundant, well, now you've got to have 4. So you get into this multiplication factor when you go with this model. It's perfectly valid. It will work, but it will run into some scalability problems. And just speaking from experience, you will have BGP sessions on here because the clouds pretty much all require you to do BGP with the edge of their environment. And for all of those layer 2 paths, if you're managing separate ingress and egress route map / route policy stuff, it can get unruly pretty quick. So just keep in mind, if you're going to go with the layer 2 model, all the traffic does come back to main campus if that's a mode that you need everything to operate in. But do keep in mind, it is going to run into some fun scalability issues. Now, I'm more than happy, KanREN's more than happy to help you work through all that BGP policy. That's one of the few things that we do really, really well. And I can even help you do a copy and paste to get all that up and working. But there's a lot of logic in documenting it for other team members can get unruly. So just kind of keep that in mind if you're looking at the layer 2 models. Fortunately though, Internet 2 actually provides a really handy option that all of the Cloud Connect users on KanREN's network today have gone with a layer 3 model. And in this model, what happens is KanREN still builds the same layer 2 service across our MPLS network. Unless you really don't want it, we're usually going to be building a pathway through to Kansas City and another pathway through Tulsa so that you have full geographical redundancy for your service. And let's actually get the text to actually line up right here. Sorry. And then Internet 2, rather than deploying a layer 2 service on the Internet 2 backbone, they're actually going to be deploying a layer 3 MPLS VPN across their core network. Now, what's nice about that is it's a routed environment, but you can still use your RFC 1918 or otherwise known as private IP space, so the 10 dots, the 192, the 172 IP spaces. Those can all still route natively. Even though you're going across a completely foreign network and letting them route your traffic because it's a completely separate route table just for your traffic. And once you have that environment built, you can actually start attaching multiple clouds to that L3 VPN. So this may be a case where you want to have like AWS over in Ashburn and Microsoft Azure connected in Dallas and maybe Google Cloud Compute connected in Southern California. I don't know what would drive your needs to do that, but you can connect all those things to the same L3 VPN, and your campus, your organization only has to peer with Internet 2 1 or 2 times if you want redundancy. And so the scalability issue from that layer 2 model completely goes away. You no longer have to worry about managing all this crazy route policy and keeping it all sane and making sure people understand how it works. It becomes much more straightforward. The other huge advantage is if you have applications deployed, as an example, in AWS that need to talk to your Active Directory that's sitting over in Azure, they can actually talk directly to each other without having to flow through the main campus first. So if you start having a main campus outage of, in your data center or in your core because it's negative 20 degrees and there's no power and all these types of things have happened, those applications in those clouds can still talk to each other. They can still authenticate users who happen to be online at that time. And so if your applications are living in the cloud or living on these remote ISSS platforms, your students can still get online, or maybe your constituents can still get online and pay their trash bill if you're a municipality, or your students can file stuff, or your teachers can file grades if it's at the end of the semester, even when the main campus is having significant outages, significant problems locally. Everything can still be working from an application layer standpoint. Cloud Connect provisioning is super nice, super smooth. Internet 2 has a provisioning system that they call OESS that they've built over the years that allows you to build point-to-point layer 2, multi-point layer 2, and then these layer 3 VPNs within their network. I know that this is an eye chart. It's way too small for probably people to see at this point. These are separate screenshots. If you guys ever want to see a demo of this, I'm happy to kind of walk you through a demo using my accounts. I can send you the screenshots a little bit bigger if anyone's interested in seeing them. But essentially what you do is you create a new L3 VPN and you give it some random name that makes sense to you. Then you add an endpoint, and then you add a peering session to that endpoint. And then you go find your other, like in this case, we're going to find the cloud endpoint, which this one's an AWS port over in Ashburn. And then, the picture, I don't have it pictured here, but we add another peering session, and it's going to give you kind of a summary, and then there's a save button, and OESS immediately starts pushing configuration out to all of the Internet 2 infrastructure. That all happens immediately. And then it starts negotiating with the cloud and saying, okay, what VLAN do we want to use for this service? What's going to be our BGP passkey? What's going to be, the IPs that we're going to throw on this BGP session? And that stuff gets worked out. Usually takes a few minutes to get it all worked out and get deployed. And all of a sudden you have an L3 VPN completely built. You've got peering sessions to the campus stood up, and you've got peering sessions into the cloud, and you've got end-to-end visibility. Everything's very, very simple. It's very clean. It's very easy to work with. And then when you want to add more cloud connections, all we could do is come in and then edit your existing L3 VPN and just keep adding more cloud connections or taking them out if you're done with those. It's very, very clean and very simple. It's a lot of self-service. And those types of functions KanREN can do on your behalf, or we can get accounts so that you can actually log into OESS and make those changes directly. So it can work either way if you're, whatever your comfort level is.
I wanted to add something real quick, Brad.
Yeah.
In our deployment, you were talking about BGP routing and whatnot. We made it simple by we carved up in the RFC 1918. We just carved up assigned 3/16, which is a lot of IP addresses. I know that, but we just for one cloud provider it was a /16. For a different cloud provider it was another /16, and I think we did 3, and it just simplifies and summarized route information and routing statements. So using those RFC 1918 does make it a lot easier for us or anyone else. Just wanted to add that in there. It can be very simple if you want to make it that way.
And of course, you're more than welcome to use, if you have globally accessible addresses from your campus block and you want to have those live out in Ashburn, you can absolutely do that, and you can use Cloud Connect to get there. That becomes a simple route policy decision for your organization. For those of you, this is just kind of an idea I have when I was making the slide deck. There's definitely some KanREN members that BGP is almost a 4-letter word, and it's like, I don't want to have to deal with that. Or, the platform that I use in my organization, adding BGP to it is a crazy expensive feature license. If you're in that type of boat, but you'd like to be able to still use Cloud Connect services, please don't let this be the barrier of entry. We still reach out to us and let us know, because what we can do is KanREN can also build a L3 VPN. We can handle the BGP peering with Internet 2's side of the fence and either do OSPF with your environment or even just do static routes. We can do all types of fun stuff there. So we have extremely full featured equipment, and if we can solve a problem, please let me know. So if you're interested in Cloud Connect, but stuff like BGP gets you a little bit worried and you're not quite sure how you would handle that, don't worry, please reach out, because we'll solve all that problem for you. We'll make that part easy for you, because that's what we're good at. And we'll let you handle we'll give you kind of the easy button to make all that actually work. And obviously, as with everything, always start your stuff with info@kanren.net is the best place to start any new request. And then just a quick mention of Internet 2 also has another service offering that they call Rapid Private Interconnect, RPI for short. So if 5 gigabit for the Cloud Connect service is not quite enough to keep up for you, you need more than 5 gigabit into AWS and somewhere, for example, Internet 2 does have a service called RPI where you can actually get dedicated 10 gig ports into that cloud. So if you need to be able to move tons and tons and tons of data, because researchers are going to decide that they're moving a bunch of their compute infrastructure into the cloud, and you need to make sure that you have really wide paths to get there, RPI can solve those problems for you. The only thing you got to keep in mind is there is actually a cost for this. So before you go making too many promises internally, be sure you reach out to us and we can talk you through what the costs are and how it all works and the model and everything. So don't let the 5 gigabit limit be the thing that also drives you away from this type of connection. There are ways to solve that. They just cost a little bit of money, but it is extremely cost effective.
Brad, one of the uses I've seen elsewhere on that rapid private interconnect, and I see Linda Roos is on the call, but I know some folks have been using that for esports, dedicated connections, like to improve esports projects. So I thought that was an interesting one. And I don't know if Linda has any comments on that, but just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, James and Brad did a great job, by the way. RPI has been used in a number of different ways to, as James was saying, connecting to an esports exchange, connecting to other cloud providers that are outside of the big three that we have in Cloud Connect. We've had a couple people connect to Oracle, their Fast Connect service. We've had an entity connect to a SIP service. So lots of, really, whatever you can dream, we probably can help you fix that up with KanREN's help here.
I just threw it into the Slack channel. If you want to see the OESS software kind of in motion, one of their staff members did a couple different demos of provisioning into AWS and provisioning into Azure that are out there on YouTube, pretty easy to digest. So you don't have to you don't have to deal with me trying to do a demo. You can actually have the guy who actually writes the code do the demo, and who's way more versed in how it all works. Anybody had any questions about Cloud Connect? Since I know this was an impromptu quick slideshow. Everyone's going to set up Cloud Connect tomorrow. All you got to do, just email us at info.kanren.net and tell Indika we need Cloud Connect like yesterday. She'll handle it for you. She'll get us started.
Yeah, you know, one thing that I would really like to hear here is what would it cost if someone wanted this kind of connectivity outside of what we're able to do in partnership with Internet 2 and GPN? You know, we've made this, aside from RPI, we've made this no additional fee. And I'd love, the business person that I now have to be would love it if Brad, you, Linda, you guys could throw, or JCCC, who was looking into this, could throw some dollar signs on the value of this.
There's obviously, specifically with AWS at least, and Azure, I'm almost positive this is the case. There's lots of carriers who can provide you that connection, and it's the likes of AT&T and you know, Cox Communications and those types of guys. However, you're definitely going to pay for it. Their portion is not going to be no cost. I'll put it that way. You're definitely still going to have your cloud side of the fence charging you on the AWS bill. You're just going to also have like an AT&T bill as well for the circuit from your location to whichever data center you want to go to. I would have sworn that I saw a rough cost from AT&T at least at one time, but I'm not comfortable trying to quote out what that was because my memory is just not good enough to say. It was, I mean, it was thousands of dollars a month.
Yeah, I was going to say more or less buying DIA.
Yeah, I mean, it was thousands of dollars a month for a 100 meg connection is what I was seeing, and that's the circuit side. Then you've also got the cloud, you know, the AWS line item bill as well. So it's not cheap.
Yeah, I can't pin a dollar sign to it, but just the part that KanREN takes care of for us is very cost effective. We're a fairly small technical shop, so KanREN, well, for example, the OESS tool, it'd be great if I knew it inside and out and whatnot, but I use it once in a life, once a year, whatever. So it's a lot easier for Brad to go in and click for me rather than sitting down and trying to figure it out. But if you want to learn how to use it, it's your prerogative. But just all the management components associated with it that KanREN and their and the service that I2 is providing for us is again, I don't know a dollar amount, but it would be several thousands a month in this service. So we feel very fortunate to have this available to us, and we're feeling pretty good about it.
Yeah, I don't think Brad's too far off. We ran the AWS calculator, and I think he's right. It's several hundred a month for a 100 megabit connection, and of course, AWS and Azure both have different fees for their services. I don't know if you mentioned it, Brad, but it might be worth mentioning too. Something that you helped us with, sort of related to this, is the data egress waiver. So getting your data into Amazon, usually there's no charge for that, but then they charge you for the data coming back out. And so with a connection like this setup, that's always kind of one of the concerns is, well, how much is Amazon going to hit me for moving my data in and out? And with the data egress waiver through I2 and the education discounts, we were able to reduce our costs a lot in that way.
Yeah, and I should have remembered to include that. Obviously, it was a lot of work on Internet 2's part to get those data egress waivers, at least from the big three today. That is a non-trivial amount of money if you're a larger organization, because even on those direct connect circuits, you're still going to pay to get your data back out without that waiver. So if you procure through AT&T or any other commercial carrier, the exact same service from a commercial carrier, you'll get to do a two-step with your cloud provider to try and make sure that that egress waiver gets applied. Whereas if you're coming over Internet 2, it's a lot more clear that, yeah, you qualify because you didn't get on that network and get through that service. Otherwise, it's a lot easier to justify it and qualify it to them.
Yeah, I was expecting a large, drawn-out legal discussion, and I think it was maybe 2 or 3 emails back and forth between AWS, and we had the waiver in place, and our monthly billing dropped significantly.
Well, I successfully took all of your break time. So if you have to be on the business meeting, sorry, not sorry though. I'm awesome, not. Yeah. Yeah, for those of you who aren't going to be on the business meeting, go ahead and feel free to hang out here, talk amongst yourselves, walk around, make fun of Cort while he's not here. Hold on, did he already disconnect? I think so. We can make fun of Cort all the time. It's getting recorded, but doesn't matter. I am going to go join the business meeting though.
If nobody mentioned yet, we ran a little bit for, yep, I see some other folks here. We ran a little bit long in the business meeting. That's entirely my fault. But we'll get going with our next presenter here in just a few minutes. Stanley, I see you're connected. Everything good? You got what you need?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon.
You know, while we're waiting for other folks to get back in here and pick up at 3:45, question. There was a number of slides I had. I'm roughly a few slides in, and then about in the first third to half of the business meeting. Some of those about vision of the future, where we're going, what that looks like, that I think that I feel like might be appropriate to share with a broader audience outside just the membership. So those of you who were in that presentation, I'm interested if you feel like I should take that and kind of scale that down, take the member only stuff out, and make that a more general presentation to share with non-members alike. Well, Deaton, you don't know. You weren't in the meeting. You don't know what I said. I saw a thumbs up from Sister D. And Leslie, thank you. Corey, thank you. Okay. I haven't seen any thumbs down and only a few thumbs up, so I will do that. if we run, maybe if we're running good on time tomorrow, I can probably fit that into a break, especially if we get a little extra time somewhere. I will pull that together. Okay, we are at 3:45 and the group is way smaller than it was earlier. I hope some more folks join in. I was a little concerned that would happen with the long break. Okay, folks are popping back in, so I will go ahead and I am going to introduce. This serves as it's only a half an hour presentation, but it's pretty much in our expanded annual meeting yet condensed conference. This serves as our keynote speech. We have Stanley Adams, who heads up our state Office of Broadband Development. Stanley has been a friend of KanREN since he came to the state, and it originally started with the broadband mapping from money from ARA, right?
Yeah, that brings back some fond memories.
So anyway, with all of the stuff going on with money coming in from the federal government and Kansas, I talked about Kansas being challenged with a lot of stuff referencing our community, but Kansas has also been just as challenged in every way with broadband. Stanley has now got a gigantic job of probably being the tip of the spear on how that federal money coming into the state gets spent and what programs get funded. So I've asked him to come here and talk about kind of the landscape as it pertains to our type of organizations, but also kind of the landscape at the state broadband office. And Stanley, take it away.
Okay. Thank you very much, Cort, and thank you all for inviting me to join you today at your annual meeting. Cort, you're right. We're in a bit of a transition, really. But what I thought I'd try to do for you today, and boy, keynote, probably overstating what I can do today. But it's what I've got, and I hopefully, more than anything, set the stage for some dialogue. I know we're in dialogue with some of you, but I really wanted to take this opportunity to emphasize and stress that the community anchor institutions are an important part of our work, and we really do want to build on that relationship across the board. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. So what I'll do, as the Cort mentioned, I'll give you a little bit of background about the Office of Broadband Development, our mission, and I also want to give you a good dose of what we're doing. I'm really excited about some strategic planning work that we're doing. And I see a few of you have already been engaged on it because we've done some outreach to get some input from you. So I'd like to walk you through that, and I'll touch on the funding landscape, but really the landscape in general for the state of Kansas and broadband connectivity. So, I think the reason I say we're in a state of transition is mainly the elephant in the room. The pandemic has just kind of changed a lot of things. And as Cort knows, as several of you know, I've been working on broadband connectivity issues related in the state of Kansas for the better part of 10 years now. Time does fly. And it's only in the last year, I've been saying the same things, the same types of things as I always have been. The major difference is a lot more people are listening and engaged on the subject. So for me, it's been a surreal juxtaposition, but in a good way. I wish it wasn't a pandemic that precipitated that, but it is what it is, if you will. The pandemic did hit. But let me just give you a little bit of backdrop, and I'll ease into kind of how the Office of Broadband Development was formally created. So last year, and kind of this leads to some what I hope are action items that we can take out of this. Last year, before the pandemic hit, Governor Kelly enacted legislation. The legislature approved, and Governor Kelly enacted in her budget the first state funding for broadband infrastructure improvement. So we recognized that there was an issue here for quite some time, and we were making the first concrete steps in terms of funding to do something about it, with a particular emphasis on our rural areas where Frankly, the business case is a little bit more, it's a lot more challenging for service providers to provide service in general, residential, business, and community anchor institutions alike. So we got the funding, and where there was actually partner legislation to go with it, that did not get passed simply because the legislature shut down early. And then by the fall, let me back up. The reason I mention that is because that funding was going to allow us to set up the first infrastructure grant program, which we ended up doing, but later. By the fall of last year, I'm not doing a good job explaining it. That was a $5 million outlay per year. But by the fall, we ended up with $60 million from the CARES Act and the Spark Committee to try to do more immediate, obviously, to drive connectivity for all the reasons that I know you all are perfectly aware, and the implications on the education space in particular. So we set up two programs with that funding, $50 million for the infrastructure and $10 million for broadband adoption, essentially for low-income housing. And in doing so, it was a very chaotic period for us. I was a staff of one, and by the middle of the pandemic, I was a staff of two, and I'm still a staff of two and struggling in that regard. But what we did, we set up the rules and regulations for how you could access the funding, what criteria, eligibility, and so on. And the reason I mention that is because it was particularly, I'm really proud of the fact that what we went out of our way to do was to make sure that community anchor institutions could apply for the funding, that they were eligible for the funds that we had available. So it was really an opportunity on very aggressive timing, but we made sure that was in there. So for example, we had a library that we gave funds to particularly on the infrastructure, but on both programs that we had, there were local cities, municipalities, there were county governments, there were healthcare institutions, and there were certainly educational institutions. We had a large number of K-12 school districts, and we had, as some of you all know, some funding that we were able to engage and partner with you all on in higher learning. So I think the punchline here is we are not unaware of the importance of the intersection of our work and the community anchor institutions, and we're acting on in that framework, and expect to continue to do so. So really want to make sure that you all hear that. I want to make sure Cort hears that every time I talk to him. The partnership is important, and I am working to try to make sure we do more in that area. So I mentioned the kind of what we did, a little bit more. What I find particularly interesting about KanREN and your work in specific is that it's about high capacity bandwidth. It's a great pivot for something I talk about a lot, which is to try to move us away from thinking about minimally adequate broadband services, because it's a drain on our economy in the long run. Because if you've got just enough, you don't even notice the downsides. If you're got a freezing, my screen is freezing up, you tend to not want to be doing things that you could be doing because of the poor connectivity. So and multiple people at home and so forth. So we're trying to be mindful of that. And when the next thing that we did, I mentioned that first state funding, we jumped on that, created another grant program, and that's active right now. We just awarded another 14 projects in the state for that initiative. So coming out of the pandemic and kind of looking forward, we've set up that infrastructure grant program I talked about. But what I wanted to share with you all a little bit more in detail is the strategy work that we're doing. You know, one of the things that I can testify to firsthand, we, up until now, had not been in a position to do an awful lot. Lack of funding, lack of resources. And now I think, you know, with the federal funding pipeline coming in, and I have a slide that I'm going to share with you just to kind of emphasize the point and give you context. We thought it was important that we have a framework, a strategic framework, to kind of drive or to guide our investments, the investments that we think are coming in short order here. So what we did was we commissioned Boston Consulting Group and Whit O'Brien's are the two consulting firms that have been working with the state on the CARES Act initially, but we took the opportunity to engage them in helping us to develop a broadband strategy in particular, so that we would not be ill prepared. And let me just, Cort, can I share a screen here? I'm gonna try that, see if it works. Oh, two-step. Okay, so hopefully you can see my screen, my PowerPoint slide. Somebody let me know for sure. So I'm, okay, great. So the first thing that I wanted to kind of highlight is acknowledge that there is a problem. And this is just, you know, and again, there are a lot of ways to take a cut at this situation, but from our perspective, this is kind of the framework that we talk about, and I welcome your thoughts in terms of how to be more compelling specifically for community anchor institutions, but I think it is applicable. The point here is the state has a lot of room to improve in terms of connectivity. What you see here, and this is important to me, is to not focus only on what you see on the left is access. That's the infrastructure, excuse me, that's the infrastructure component. And a lot of the devil is in the details of how you define numbers, but there, 75% have access to what, roughly 75% have access to what we could consider robust, if you accept 125 as robust. Speed's not everything, but it sure is something. Similarly, the connectivity issues for us as a state is around affordability. It's what I like to call constructive access. So it's not you having to sit in a parking lot to do your homework, parking lot of a library or the parking lot of a McDonald's, and that does happen still. I know you all know that. But here you can see that this based on this data and using $60 a month as a threshold, you can see that's a really big chunk of Kansans don't have access in that regard. And then the third point here, really elevated in importance for me as a consequence of our broadband partnership adoption grant program. When I initially set up that was one of those pandemic response programs that we set up, the $10 million funding availability. When I set that program up initially, it was really only for funding low-income support. So paying for subscription services, which will be your affordability column in the middle. And then I got a lot of feedback from the educational community that said that they were good on that, but they were more concerned about the devices that enabled that. So that turned my attention to this. And you can see as we started to look into it, the data bears it out that it is a significant issue. So we wanted to try to deal with that in an important way. So this is the long way of saying there is a problem that we're trying to solve. And from a strategic standpoint, what we said is that, and I've heard this, I want to stress that I've heard this from your community in particular. We had conversations with several of the universities, and what came across loud and clear is that, and from a strategic standpoint, the state needs to be much more aggressive and coordinated in its focus. So, you know, here is just, you know, kind of not to tell you what you already know, the pandemic simply exacerbated the digital divide issues that we're currently facing. And I mentioned the federal funding landscape really is changing. I think that's my next slide here. Oops. Oh, well, before I tell you about the funding, let me tell you about the framework that I set out with the strategy, and hopefully am getting some feedback from you all along the way. So the governor had a framework for growth, and we tried to make sure we were being smart and getting traction to align with other initiatives that the state government's involved in. So you see, we refer to that here. But my focus is really to try to have deliverables that are meaningful, and not just to produce a strategic document that we can say it's really nice looking. So we established, the consultants helped us out. We're still working with them on establishing that baseline and near term, developing that comprehensive strategy. And importantly for us, what's the operating model for my office? And to have an action plan to implement the initiatives. What I didn't mention, I want to make sure I kind of emphasize that continuum of events in the last year included in October, the governor saying by executive order that the Office of Broadband Development is formally established. So I was doing work in the space, but this kind of gives me basically license to do what I'm doing in a much more impactful way. In large part, in part due to the fact that there's a lot of funding coming in and we need to be codified in how we're going to go about doing that. The other point I wanted to make here, as we set up our strategic planning steering committee, we wanted to make sure, if you notice, this is not so much to say that it's a government steering committee, but this is the state of Kansas, so that's what it is. But there's kind of what it is and what it isn't. It is representing key constituent stakeholder groups by our government, right? Senior leaders, obviously, my boss, excuse me, Lieutenant Governor Tolan, Dr. Norman, Dr. Watson in education K-12, Dr. Flanders representing higher ed, and by inference, of course, that's also KanREN. And we've had numerous conversations on this front. And also Secretary Burns-Wallace, Secretary Beam, and Secretary Lorenz. So what I have been trying to do through this effort, and certainly hope I have your support ongoing, is to try to change the conversation a bit when it comes to the implications of connectivity, robust connectivity, if you will. I'm really kind of big on this getting away from the minimally adequate approach to connectivity, but to change the conversation to be more focused on the constituent groups that use the services, need the services, rather than the suppliers of the services. We need to engage our service provider community in making sure that they understand what our needs are and that we're configured in a way that makes it easier for them to provide those services. So that's why you see here, by way of our steering committee, an emphasis that really helps us to get to that. And to that end, we had extensive stakeholder engagement. We're not done, so your thoughts and comments are not are still welcome and open. They're always welcome in my office. But for this specific exercise, we're going to hopefully get a draft ready for previewing in the next few weeks. But the other piece of the pie was that we engaged with a lot of stakeholders, non-governmental. I didn't want to inundate you with slides, but there's a large range of stakeholders, and from businesses, small businesses, large businesses, in the healthcare sector, talking to folks in each of the sectors that are major, what the consultants call critical use cases. That's a fancy way of saying healthcare, education, public safety, economic development. So we're trying to be holistic and we're trying to be thoughtful about what this needs to look like. So hopefully, well before your next annual meeting, we'll be able to walk you through the details of our strategic plan and kind of what we've already done so far. But let me give you just a really sneak peek and hopefully see if you all have any questions or thoughts. I really would like to hear from you as well. In terms of how we are thinking about the strategy so far, what we've tried to do, and this is really, I tried to put something together that spoke specifically to the educational environment. So and you see on the left, those are the initiatives or priority areas that we've identified that's intended to cover the full range of the broadband ecosystem in effect. So the infrastructure, the Kansas Connected part in the naming nomenclature, we're not settled on nomenclature, but the actual connectivity, actually, let me back up. I'm skipping over my own good points here. The infrastructure, Cort, I hope you're not asleep. This is important. You're baked into our strategic plan here, so we're counting on your continued engagement. on the infrastructure front. I think that's a really important point for the state, and we need to figure out how to leverage that as the funding mechanisms start to kick in. The Kansas Connected is really talking about adoption, digital literacy, and what we're doing in our strategic plan is specifying specific programs and pilot projects as necessary or appropriate that will actually help us to measure success and build on and improve on the work that we do. And then obviously you hear me hammering away on the sector-specific broadband applications, and education being a very important one. I've been pretty good about, been pretty good about drawing a distinction between the needs in K-12 versus higher learning. It's not that they need to be separate, but I think there's some commonalities. There's also some distinctions. So we're trying to be mindful of that in this space as well. And Cort, many of you have heard me talk about this. I think what you all do in terms of providing that research and education backbone, if you will, the high capacity, enabling our university system to do the work that they do, I think is a key enabler for our competitive advantage. We need to build on it, and we need to harness it in a much more aggressive manner than I think we have to date. Hopefully we can come up with some approaches that will help to get us there. So that's, and we've done similar work and specific initiatives that we've outlined, the initiatives, and then there are programs and projects within each of the initiatives is what we've done, is how we've set this up. And lastly, I think I want to just take a minute to talk about the funding side of the equation so that you all, I'm just trying to ring the bell for you to be fully engaged. And I know you are, but to the extent you can be engaged more, this if this doesn't get your attention, I got nothing, because this is where the money is. It's significant. It is significant. The first item there is the CARES Act, and I just told you a little bit about what we did with the state of Kansas. It did with our share of funding. A good chunk of that went into broadband infrastructure and adoption. And I'm trying to remember the exact numbers. There was, well, I don't want to say the wrong number. So number two, was December. Last December, they Congress enacted, or the president enacted bill that passed that really put significantly more dollars on the table. And it doesn't all list, I don't have it all listed out here, but again, a lot of significant dollars. The $8 billion is kind of the one that has a lot of teeth in it, although it's smaller than $25 billion rental assistance. But what I wanted to point out here is within that $8 billion, there are dollars that we think that are destined to come to Kansas. And even in this context, those actually are not that big of dollars. There's some tribal funding available, and there's also some minority education institutions funding. There's some funding dedicated for institutions that serve minority populations that we think is going to be applicable for us. And then lastly, well, it's really not last, but it's the last on the slide. The American Rescue Plan Act, you all probably have heard about. That is a really significant game changer for us as a nation and as a state. You just see some highlights here. The second bullet here on the number 3, it refers to the $10 billion coronavirus capital project fund for infrastructure projects. The punchline is there. That's at least $140 million that will be for infrastructure. And now keep in mind, you're also hearing me say the whole equation is not all infrastructure. It's infrastructure and it's also constructive access to that infrastructure. Call it what you will, digital equity, adoption, and digital literacy, knowing how to use the tool if you do have access to it, wherever you are, whether you're at home or at school or at work. So I am pretty optimistic about that. I'm also intimidated because I'm still a staff of 2, and I've got to figure out how to set up some programmatic solutions that will be driving this. So hopefully I have piqued your interest in working more closely. I think the next couple of months are going to be pretty intense as we figure out how we're going to go about it. the name of the game is to work collaboratively, is my view of thinking about it. We are configuring ourselves. I mentioned I'm a staff of 2. We're doing something about that. Some of you have heard me say, hey, if you've got some people, if you have some suggestions, I'm going to be looking for people pretty soon. The good news is the state is pretty sober-minded about the reality that this is a case where some staffing is needed. So I'm optimistic that we'll be able to do that. But strategically, the point here is simply to show you that we're trying to make sure that we are in a position to do the touch points collaboratively with community anchor institutions and all of the key stakeholders, libraries, with you all, and your input is really important. So I think that's essentially the main points that I wanted to try to get, and I wanted to make sure I left a few minutes for some dialogue or thoughts and get some perspective from you on any or none of the above. This here is just a snapshot of our vision and what we're trying to accomplish. But this is a bit of a sneak peek because this is still in draft mode because we haven't finalized. In fact, we've got a few things to do before we can say we're done. So with that, I'll stop.
All right, I'll jump in. I'm not shy, and Cort's referred to me in the last meeting about having a passion for this. So I appreciate meeting you. I don't think we've had a chance to meet before. I'm Gary Pratt. I'm Vice President for IT and the Chief Information Officer at Kansas State University. And this is my 4th institution, over 30 years as CIO. And I have a lot of experience in this realm. In Kentucky particularly, 15, 20 years ago, part of their Connect Kentucky plan. But I was also at Eastern Washington University in Spokane. So I've had a lot of experience being in an island surrounded by rural. I'm now in Manhattan, so even more so than the other experiences I've had. And I am very passionate about this topic and have been very verbal about this topic. I did have an opportunity to sit through a presentation to Kansas State College of Business by David Tolan and Trent Armburst, and they talked about the Kansas framework for growth, of which a lot of what you're talking about, I think, comes straight from the efforts that were discussed there. And I'll be just as frank and as honest with you as I was with them, that I am excited as heck to find out that you were working on a strategic plan for broadband. They did not mention that that was happening, and that it's so far along without you having reached out to this group before now. I think the fact that you have KanREN listed there is great. The fact that you have Blake Flanders on the group is great, but that's KBOR, not the actual institutions that are in the trenches doing this kind of stuff. KanREN getting an investment is absolutely a good step towards doing this, and they have the best reach out right now throughout Kansas to lots of different areas within the state. I can tell you I've been volunteering. I volunteered to Secretary Burns Wallace. I volunteered to these folks. I volunteered everywhere. Nobody's ever reached out to get us support from me or from RITSI. We want to very strongly recommend and have done a set of talking points for recommendation to the Kansas Board of Regents to ensure that we have RITSI participation in strategic planning. It's kind of sad that we weren't brought in at the beginning of a strategic planning process, but I appreciate you reaching out for our input now. But I tell you, we need to be in it before it's a finalized plan, not to see the end results and put in comments. We need to be there early and often. And I have volunteered to be one of those representatives, and Cort has heard my harping on this quite a bit. I think that we are in a unique position to be able to support you as the institutions across the state, many of which are in rural areas or surrounded by rural areas. I can tell you that the COVID crisis just doubled down on the need for this. I had students, staff, and faculty that couldn't participate in education and remote work because they resided 5 miles outside of Manhattan or in other areas of the state and just had no broadband access. I spent many hours talking to providers in many of those areas, got some discounts, got some even free access for folks, but by far and away was not able to make the difference we needed to make to truly raise the capability for students, staff, and faculty. I can tell you that you mentioned the stimulus dollars that have been come forward. Altogether, those add up to about $60 billion that have landed in the state of Kansas. I can tell you, I am not overly convinced that those have been well focused dollars. A lot of those have been used to pad the pockets of large internet providers and not provided a whole lot of outcome. That's not how you strategically invest dollars. You need to have a formal strategic plan where you work through how you do that, bring in smaller internet providers, bring in folks like Cort and institutions like the RITSI is Regents institutions, CIO group, if you will. And I can tell you Kansas State has a unique situation in that we have research extension, which has a presence in every county across the state of Kansas. We run all of the Kansas extension offices. So we have access to the people who are going to benefit from this. And this is high on our cyber land grant mission. We are the first land grant in the country. And we have every expectation of becoming a cyber land grant. And that's not adding a bunch of tech on campus. That's adding capabilities throughout the state so we can raise the economic development capabilities throughout the state. We are losing a lot of people because they do not have this kind of access. So students, they want to get, we get this split personality where we have people in these rural counties saying, we want to get our students educated. But we don't want to get our students educated because as soon as they're educated, they leave because they don't have the access to the resources they need to stay. And broadband is the first step toward it.
I want to make sure you might be preaching to the choir a little bit. I want to maybe emphasize a point. It is huge success that I'm even able to do a strategic plan. And I hope you receive it as a success that I had heard of KanREN before we did our strategic plan and reached out to KanREN before I did our strategic plan. So as you probably know, stakeholder engagement is a tricky thing, and trying to cram everything that we're trying to do. And I'm not defensive because I do receive you, and I think this bodes well for the future because it just means we need to work together. You and I can't sit down and talk soon enough, is what I think. So
okay. Well, please reach out because I am volunteering to be a part of this success for the state of Kansas.
Right.
And Cort and I have had a lot of conversations. Actually, James Deaton, I don't know if there I see him from Great Plains Network is also a partner in being able to make this happen. So, and I can tell you my colleagues at the other institutions are also partners in making this happen. So please reach out.
Let me emphasize one other thing that you said, and I want to make sure you're hearing my perspective correctly, because I don't want you to think I'm in a different camp. You mentioned how wisely we spend dollars, and I hope you heard me when I mentioned I wanted to change the conversation. That's what I was talking about, right?
Yeah.
It's focus on the end users and and again, I'm passionate about this too. That's what we got to talk.
Yeah.
It is just critical that we get out of this mindset of even being okay with what will meet the needs for today. This is infrastructure.
I think to the future. Yeah.
You have to. And as a steward of taxpayer dollars, I'm not wanting to reinvest every couple of years in a new network.
Absolutely.
So yeah, there's a lot there. Like I said, I skimmed over a whole lot of stuff here. So I just want to assure you, my thinking on this is more alike than not on if I understand where you're coming from.
And I feel it. I feel it in what you're saying, but I needed you to hear it from me directly, where I'm at. And I can tell you one part of funding that you didn't hit in your presentation is the ambitious American Jobs Plan that the president, infrastructure, that's 100 billion potential coming to broadband, specifically rural broadband. We need to prepare for that before it gets approved.
Hey, since you all are paying attention, let me mention one other thing about that. Because I kind of, got a delicate balance. Talk about what's in the hand versus what you think is going to be in the hand. And that's not passed yet. And that's your Congress and mine, so who knows what's going to happen. But I do want to share with you a little bit of an anecdote. And actually, I see we're running out of overtime here, so I'll just make this brief. I was on a call, and this is an encouraging point, I think. I was on a call as they were deliberating. They were telling us about the American Rescue Plan components, and that it was going to mean at least $100 million per state. Folks like me are excited about that, right? And this was with a couple of senators who were kind of marshaling this stuff on broadband. Senator Klobuchar, Senator King, and another senator from Louisiana. It was bipartisan for sure. And here's the point that they made when it was all said and done. This was a conference call with all the state broadband leaders, and they were getting peppered with questions, and we were asking, we're all excited. Wow, this is really great. This is really great. $100 million will go a long way. We can do a lot with $100 million per state. Great. And the pushback was, no, I don't think you understand. You should think of that $100 million as a down payment on what we intend to push through on the infrastructure bill. So, and then sure enough, when the proposal came out, yeah, they weren't kidding. So I am trying to not get overly excited about what's not enacted, but I'm also trying to configure, and that's what I think that's what I'm trying to convey to you. What I'm trying to do is make sure the state is configured in a way that we aren't squandering the funding, squandering the opportunity. I don't know if you guys know, but strategic plans can get a bad rap, and I'm trying to make this one an actionable one, and really do look forward to continuing the conversation with you, so that I can, because I want to start drilling down into some specific things that we can do at the university level, and who else needs to be at the party, to your point.
Please put me on the list.
I have a question for you, Stan. Not necessarily as a member of KanREN, but as a U.S. citizen. I've lived in my location for 25 years, and I can look out off my front porch and see the city of Lawrence, and then I can look off my back porch and see the town of Perry. And I have no internet. I have no internet options out here other than wireless. And I understand that there's a cluster of houses out here, and for a carrier to come in and make a hefty investment to provide internet service for a few people out here in the area, how are you going to get beyond that obstacle to where, I mean, as Gary mentioned, there's a lot of rural people out in Western Kansas, and they're far and few between. How are you going to get beyond? I mean, the concern is we're going to throw a bunch of money to the carriers or to the service providers, and they aren't going to really run with it. How are you going to make this model? What's your model, or how are you going to make it accountable for these providers to follow through on the money? I'm assuming they're going to be receiving some money in some of these this money flooding into Kansas.
Right.
How are you going to make them accountable for doing what they supposedly are supposed to do?
Yeah, you touch on a pretty important point there. There's multiple pieces to it, but just in brief, I would say there's several things that we're intending to try to do. We again, I think we set the stage to have constructive and working relationships with the service provider community. For example, one of the things that the service provider community was very concerned about with our pandemic response grant, or one of them, was that they wanted to make sure we weren't using taxpayer dollars to deploy competing services, right? Overbuilding or duplication of services. So we address that to I think their satisfaction in our approach, and I'm okay with that. I don't have a problem with competition, but from a practical standpoint, the taxpayer dollars aren't quite ready. We're not in a position where that would be something that would make a lot of sense for us. But the other thing I think you're touching on here is kind of how to get all of the locations connected. And what we did in the Broadband Acceleration Grant is a perfectly good example. One of the things we did, we said, okay, improvement over the pandemic response. We said, if you want access to the funding, several things you got to do. First of all, you've got to talk to us. We required an interview so we could ask the questions. And those questions included, and I just want to share it with you because I think this does get to your concern in part. There was a really good example of where we're talking to a potential awardee and we're looking at the coverage area that they propose and we ask them common sense questions. Okay, so it's going to cover from here to here to here. Okay, great. Well, wait a minute, zoom in. What about those houses right there? How come they aren't? Are they not getting connected? And the answer was no. So to answer your question, the way we dealt with that is, well, it's required. You can't just cherry pick the best addresses with taxpayer dollars. I just can't do that, right? So it's kind of, so then I turn the tables. It's up to you. If you want this fund, if you want these funding, if you want this money, I'm interested in covering everybody because I am not going to be on the receiving end of the phone call from that one house that got skipped. And then I'm on the receiving end of the legislator who says, what the heck are you doing over there, Adams? So that's a piece of it. It does get a little dicier at the macro level because one of the questions becomes, how much money, taxpayer dollars, should you spend for a single address, right? We're not at that point yet, thankfully. There's enough obvious areas that a little bit of support from the government can make the business case work for somebody to actually deploy and operate, because the state's not interested in trying to be an operator. So anyway, so there's a lot. You get me on talking on this, and I keep going. So let me.
I think I've actually been with you when you got that call from a legislator saying, "What are you doing over there, Adams?" Hey guys, this is a great conversation, but we're getting close on 15 minutes behind schedule, and I want to be respectful to Dallas Kranker at USD 250, who's got our last presentation for today, another member success story. So if it's okay, could we move on to that? And this certainly is a conversation that's going to continue. And to the extent that the membership is interested, this is certainly, KanREN makes a great venue to have some of these conversations in a bit broader community, and that we do span several anchor groups. So I'm sure we're not done with the topic. And thank you for taking us a little longer, Stan and Gary, because man, that last 15 minutes there was really great. But
and Cort, I would be remiss if I didn't jump in here just real quick, just to give a huge shout out to Stan and Melinda for joining in with the membership committee. That's been a huge step forward, and obviously we've got a lot of work to do, but like you said, we'll do it together, and we will get this done.
Great.
Yeah, so for everyone else's benefit, one of our committees, you'll hear from the committees, board committees tomorrow afternoon, the membership committee chaired by Sandra. Stan and Melinda have now been participating in some of the discussions in the committee, and really excited to see how that's kind of coming together, where kind of what, as Stanley's mission is evolving from one that started with broadband mapping into all of this, and our community kind of, I feel like we're kind of getting sort of a gelled set of goals for ourselves also. It's nice to see that come together.
All right, thank you all.
Thank you, Stanley. I appreciate you making the time today.
Sure thing.
Dallas, I'm sorry we're running a little bit late, but as they say, we've saved the best for last.
Thank you, Cort. Well, as Cort said, I'm Dallas Kranker, Network System Administrator for Pittsburg Schools, which is a K through 12 here in Pittsburg, Kansas. I've been with the school for about 17 years now, 14 of those years as network admin. And in that time, we've always remained KanREN members. That includes always having KanREN as our ISP. We believe the added benefit of being able to call on KanREN staff in time of need has always been a great safety net for us. Our experience with KanREN has been exceptional. To illustrate how efficient and beneficial KanREN has been to our success, I want to tell you a little story about our first day of school this year and the disaster we had to overcome that day. I'm going to mention some KanREN folks by name, I hope that's okay, and how all of them went above and beyond to help us out. So on the first day of school this year, our old Juniper firewall failed. This brought our entire internet connection down. We didn't have a lot of options when that happened, and that's not something you can just go out to Walmart and buy. So our first call was to KanREN. We sent out other requests, mostly to vendors, but none of them really could get the equipment on site and configured in a 24-hour window like we needed. Our first order of business with KanREN was getting a backup of our old config sent off to Heath at KanREN to begin building a new managed firewall that KanREN would provide, hosted on site with us, but managed by KanREN. Heath's experience with firewalls led us to this solution. Fortunately, KanREN had the hardware on hand, and it was determined the configuration could be done within the day. Next up was working with Casey at KanREN to do some internal routing in order to get basic internet backup for us. Casey's past experience with HP Aruba equipment was very helpful here. Most all of our internal routers and switches are HP Aruba. After just barely an hour of downtime, our schools were back up on this temporary internet connection with traffic from the KanREN router being sent directly to our core router. It wasn't an ideal scenario, but for the time being, it provided basic internet connectivity. Later that afternoon, when the config on the new managed firewall was ready, Brad at KanREN started the drive down to Pittsburg from Lawrence with our replacement managed firewall hardware. Once he arrived and started right after classes were out, our staff worked with Brad to rack up and install the new managed FortiGate firewall. Brad's experience with integration assured a quick transition. We'd actually looked at buying a FortiGate in the past, but due to costs, we had to put that dream aside as we kept searching for other options. But this managed solution was a perfect fit for us for this school year. And now as this year's coming to a close, we can see where we need to upgrade this solution, including physical fiber interfaces to SFP Plus and more processing power to accommodate content filtering across our whole district. This new firewall has been a great change for us. We've achieved a level of security we could never have attained before. We gained a new secure VPN functionality, which keeps our devices from having to be exposed online. And when we needed content filtering for a new LTE-based home internet service we implemented this year, also with KanREN's assistance, it was as easy as contacting Heath and switching on the content filtering service after just some basic configuration options we selected. Weekly now, we receive threat detection and bandwidth reports. These reports have helped us many times to identify threats, both internal and external. In addition to weekly reports, KanREN provides a real-time insight portal that we can log into to view threats, traffic, VPN connections, and stats, applications and websites detected by the content filter, and more. I'm certain there were more people behind the scenes at KanREN that I'm forgetting to mention here, because so much was required to make this possible for us in such a short amount of time. The billing, the contract, all of that was taken care of. Getting the solution in place was primary. Paying for it was secondary. I can't count how many times KanREN has been there for us this past school year, and anyone involved in education this past year understands there have been some new challenges. Every one of KanREN's staff is an expert in their field. We consider ourselves lucky as a school district to be associated with this consortium. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, you made up the time we lost. That was concise.
Thank you, Cort.
I have to say one thing. I've never met Heath, but I heard his name so many times. He's a Superman. I had to look him up, and I guess this is your 5-year anniversary, Heath? From what I see from KanREN.
Yes, that's correct. This is my 5th year at KanREN. And I do want to say that, yeah, while me and Casey and Brad were kind of doing a lot of hands-on stuff, everybody at KanREN, I think, was involved at some point during that day. And it was a team effort.
Except me, all I had to do was say yes.
You're also correct that he's a Superman.
You know, everybody on our tech team is rock stars, and they don't always get, you know, like literally FaceTime like they're getting right now. So as we wrap up for the day, we're about 4 minutes over, but I'm going to say, hey, if you're on the staff, turn on your turn on your video. Hands up. Yeah, these are all the people who are really doing it all day, every day. You know, and it's easy for, you know, like Brad and I, or Erica and I, or Brad and Erica. It's easy for us to kind of be in the spotlight a lot, but it's all these other people on here whose voice you hear, or whose emails or Slack messages you read that you may not see their faces as much. They're the ones that are really making it happen. If these folks weren't there holding it all down, so that we could go out and say yes, or Brad could draw the pictures or make the plans, we wouldn't be what we are. So I cannot say, and the last year of the pandemic just has really solidified this for me. We have an awesome team here, and every one of these people are rock stars. Even Casey. I have known Casey the longest, and our relationship goes back to when he and I were both at that USD 250 place, so he gets picked on a bit.
Yeah, and I fully expected at least one insult today, so I'm wearing my insult-resistant red polo.
Well, I was just gonna say, they don't look like much, but gosh dang, they do a great job.
There you go. Two of them, Casey.
Insult resistant.
I was going to say, that's the best compliment we've ever had, Mark. Thanks.
Hey, thank you everyone for being here today. We are a little past the end for the day. I am planning on hanging around here till around 5 o'clock. Spend a little more time if anyone wants to hang out, have some smaller group conversations, or discuss anything. I'll be here till 5, or everyone else is out of the Zoom, whichever comes first. Hope you'll all come back tomorrow. For the rest, we've got tomorrow, we've got an absolutely captivating presentation from Brad on what we're going to do with terabit connections. Some more member success, and James Deaton from GPN, who's been here all day today. Thank you, James. Is going to be talking with Casey about some of our HPC and CI efforts. And then in the afternoon, we're going to have a chance to see a little bit about what our board does. You guys are going to get a chance to meet and hear from some of our board members a bit more, and what those committees that we've alluded to time and time again today do. And then hopefully you'll have absorbed enough that you'll be ready to talk and bring a bunch of great ideas. Mark and I are going to kind of wrap it up with a session on some vision casting for our future. And then we'll go through election results and wrap up the formality piece of the annual meeting with the both election results and rates and budget vote. And we'll be done for the annual meeting for another year. So see you all tomorrow. We'll be hanging out here for a while if you need anything else.
I was just going to point out, KanREN staff all wearing red shirts today. It's a good thing we're not in Star Trek world, because that'd be a bad day for network operations.
It'll be fine. Maybe your next gen.
Yeah, I was also thinking, Casey, your white balance is a little bit off there because you almost look orange. And that was not meant to be a criticism, just I noticed that your camera's white balance is a little bit funky.
It's a little bit dark in here. I should probably try changing that bulb for something that's a little bit whiter and brighter.
Yep, he works at KanREN. He can afford one bulb in the room.
Dark at your place?
Yeah, if I had my way, it'd be a lot darker. I'm an IT guy. I like working in a cave.
If I didn't have my camera on, the lights would be off. So
yeah.
I've been campaigning for Windows in my office for like a couple of years now.
When I was at Washburn, the running joke was every year during the fiscal year, when we do budget for the next year, we'd always requisition a skylight for the IT office. It was, of course, was denied every year.
Yeah, and so like back when we all worked here in the office, you've got that nice big window right by your desk and all you do is close the blinds.
Don't. I leave them up and get the sunlight, except, you know, about 2 o'clock or so when it glares off my screen.
I mean, let's face it, IT folks are always going to complain about something. They always need something. I need more light. No, that's too much light. I need better speakers. It's always something with those guys.
Oh, hey, Jamie had an announcement in the chat, but I'm going to invite her to say that. By the way, there's another one of our team. I'll tell you all, I have a special place in my heart for the contributions that Jamie makes, because without her, I would not be on track to do things like get agreements signed, to get purchase orders through. I mean, she pretty much is my logistics on a daily basis.
Thank you, Cort. And it was great to see everybody today. But was just saying, and sorry if I don't get anyone's name correct, but Jacob Reinchard, Sister D, Audra Brownlee, Sandra Warner, Matthew Carver, and Joshua Jacobs are our swag winners for today. So thank you guys for heading out on the social channels and liking and commenting today. And you'll get all your good stuff early next week. Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say thank you to Jamie, Indika, Erica, Brad, the whole staff for making Cort look good. I know that's a hard job.
Man. I wasn't expecting it, Mark. He just came in out of nowhere.
Yeah, well, I know what it's like. I've got great staff that make me look good too. And that's probably even more difficult.
And you're probably feeling the winds down now too. I mean, you've had to put up with me one-on-one every week all year long, and you can see the end.
I can see the end, but honestly, it's gone by fast. It's gone by really fast.
I'll take that as a good thing.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know how much we've got accomplished, but gosh dang, we've got a lot of good things going, a lot of good things started. And I look forward to seeing how things are going to play out here in the next year or so.
Oh no, we beat sales tax. I mean, that one.
Oh, that's true.
That was pretty ugly there for a while.
Yep, that was a big one.
For those of you that don't know, in the fall, after a successful routine renewal of KanREN state sales tax exemption, we were then retroactively denied and had to fight the Department of Revenue and the State Board of Tax Appeals. And that was when I found out that, you know what, man, these our backbone members really will rally their government affairs behind a problem if we've got a big one that they can help with.
Yep.
KanREN became the name heard everywhere in Topeka, I think, for about a week.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. I know I had mentioned it to Ritzy, and I think everybody got on board and got their people involved within a day. I mean, it happened fast.
Oh, and by the way, we are still state tax exempt.
And should not have any problems for quite some time. I think we've got it addressed and handled for.
It'd take a pretty big statute change to unseat us now.
Yeah.
Hey, Indika, I was hanging on here. This is Brian,
Hey, Brian.
at SDAG. Have you guys got updated Zoom pricing?
So our current pricing is locked down through the remainder of this fiscal year. Our contract with them will end end of FY 2022, at which point we'll renegotiate prior to that, but that'll be the point at which things potentially change. Yeah.
All right. And I also wanted to ask, I know you guys are recording this. When are you going to provide the recording? I missed the first 30 minutes.
We'll
and
have
the
to,
reason I'm asking, the reason I'm asking is I've actually, you guys don't know this, but I wrote in memberships to KanREN for 10 small school districts. And so I really wanted to talk to you about services for small school districts, and I don't know how well you cater to the 1A and 2A school districts, or if that's something you guys even want to do. But as it stands right now, your Zoom pricing was, made it more cost effective to just purchase it through you than direct. So, and I think you guys could be a resource for small districts alike. So,
the answer to that from the top and the board chair, who is sitting next to me on my screen, is yeah, we are absolutely interested. There, especially for connectivity, there are sometimes challenges because of the work we have to do with the telecom industry, who quite frankly, I mean, they can price fix us out of the game, and they do. But that doesn't mean we won't try. And if we don't come out with a good enough value proposition, I'll say it's never because we don't try. It's just that sometimes, especially in rural areas, the way things work in Kansas aren't so conducive for us.
Yeah, well, and I don't know that connectivity is probably going to be a priority for them. I guess I'm more interested in speaking to other support that you might be able to provide when they get in a pinch. We made it clear that, for small school districts, it's a different world than it was 10 to 20 years ago, that they need to outsource the really specialized services that they need. And they can't expect to go out and hire somebody that can do those. I mean, everything they need for their network. I mean, and they need management services. And I know you guys are probably all aware that there's a lot of these small school districts that are turning to outsource tech support. And many of those companies are in the KC metro area, and they're providing remote services.
We did
for the entire district.
We did a pilot with State School for the Blind and the Deaf on some of that last year, and that's something that we're going to move forward with. I will tell you, to be honest, it's a little bit of a challenge for us because we're typically used to an institution being connected, and that kind of support is a heck of a lot easier and a lot more efficient when they're on network. Otherwise, we tend to get in the he said, she said argument with an upstream provider all too often. But in some of the direct stuff in the district, we don't have as good of ability to crawl in to work on it. But yeah, it's good to hear that we're aware of that, and definitely have made some moves in that direction. I'd say right now we're still kind of trying to figure out how effective we can be at that, as we're more of a wide area network shop and not so much on the land support. However, most of these red shirts, thank you, Brad. Thank you. Most of these red shirts here in front of us all came from that kind of environment originally. So I don't think they're that far removed from it.
Yeah. Well, I'll get with you guys on these 10 schools. We haven't moved forward with the grant's been somewhat delayed because of due to COVID, but we're trying to get at least Zoom licensing in place for next year. And they all are interested in at least that, just at least that service. But I think it's, could lead to other services as well. I can tell you that, a lot of the outsourced services that they're receiving, they have really good salespeople. And I don't think that they really are very technical. The staff for the companies that I've dealt with don't have a ton of technical expertise, and they really heavily rely on a local person to do more than they really should be doing.
Brian, we have a number of members who have done that. Yeah. We've had the kind of outside in or sometimes brought in to be on the inside view of that. And I think that the way you worded that was very telling and very polite when you said they have really good salespeople. And,
Yeah.
and that's really the crux of it for us. Is the last thing I want to do is get into that and have anyone say, yeah, KanREN did a good job of selling that to us. My fear is one of the reasons why those sales work is that they don't always have the level of support to back up what they sold. And I'm afraid that it may not be possible to, how do I be really correct about saying this now? I'm afraid that we may not be able to sell at the kind of price points schools are used to seeing from those organizations, yet provide the kind of grade of service that we need to be who we are.
Yeah, definitely.
So we'll walk down that hill. We definitely won't run there.
Yep, sounds great. All right, well, I'll see you guys all tomorrow.
Brian, before I forget, let's touch base. I know I just looked up what I'd sent. We probably need to like just documentation wise with new dates, because I think we're now in the whole new year.
Yeah. Yeah, you
and
remember
then-
me asking for some generic
Yes,
quotes, and
I
you're
remember
like,
now.
what is this? And I said, don't worry about it right now. I'll get back
Yes.
with you when it actually
So
matters.
maybe next
Well,
week or the week after, and then kind of run through what you guys are including in that grant or had included and figure it out a little bit more now that we're closer.
yeah, I'd like to touch base and let you know where we're at with the districts that are participating, and then yeah, then there's a whole onboarding type thing because we have to just communicate with each of them, and that's
we'll get it sorted.
something. Yeah,
or try to get it sorted.
It's been fun. I'll be glad when this whole project's behind me. So, all right. Yeah, just reach out to me, Indika. I appreciate that.
No problem.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
Well, this is the time I would normally be asking Matt Carver to buy me a drink, but since we're not in person, I can't have him do that.
Good idea.
I mean, and Check's virtual. Check is going to be virtual again this year, so I can't make him do that at Check.
Exactly.
Just make him use one of the delivery services.
That's right. Hey, Mark, I've got a good arm. I could throw a beer really far.
Yeah, you could almost put it to me, I'm sure.
So Mark, you drive up here to Lawrence to see your kids all the time. You just
not all the time, but
well, you know, I guess make Matt, make a pit stop at Manhattan. At Salina on your.
I do get through Salina once in a while.
Yeah, you need to call me, man.
Yeah.
So we're down to a small group now. So I put up the background.
Hey, all right.
I used a few times right when the pandemic hit, and we were all stressed out. And the staff did it one night, and I hosted a few with the quilt, where I had kind of a standing meeting in the evening where it was like, everybody, pour your drink, join in Zoom, come to the tiki tub. We'll sit around and have a couple and have a good time. And that was kind of fun for a while. So I figured I'd bring up the tiki tub, and then you could just tell Mark to make his own. And then Matt, you can take credit.
There you go. I want to know how your Mai Tai game is, Cort.
Hey, Cort, I'm going to jump in real quick, make you host and jump off. And so when you're done, you can end and it should quit the recording.
Oh, Indika's tired of us.
No,
I get it. I totally
I'm trying to get
understand.
some paperwork done.
What is I need to do with? Do I need to do something?
No, when you end the
about
meeting, everything
recording?
will be done.
Okay. Yep, there's my boring background back. So Mark, why do you let being in the office stop you?
I try to be a rule follower, and they tell me I'm not supposed to have alcohol on campus. I can't say that I've never broken that rule, but I don't do it on a regular basis.
It's just your hand sanitizer, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I guess some of that. But
it accidentally spilled into your drink.
Yeah.
Just throat sanitizer.
Yeah.
Well, hey, actually, a fun fact about that: ethanol will not dry out your skin the way isopropanol does.
Yeah, but
So-
isn't that some kind of party foul?
Huh?
If you're putting your ethanol on your skin, if you spill your drink on your skin, you'll stay
okay.
hydrated, but
Probably. So I've actually been using ethanol so I don't dry out my skin. So I've got just a little travel squirt bottle in my truck for my hands. And I mentioned something to that about that to our accountants. And ever since I said that, they keep talking to me about the rocket fuel lattes I go get in the morning. They've been accusing me of. I'm like, I don't do that to start my day. That's just in the afternoon.
Kahlua, just you need a shot of Kahlua in the morning in your hot
But seriously,
chocolate or
I learned
coffee.
more about the differences between isopropanol and ethanol in the last year than I ever had a clue existed. Because I kind of start discovering this, and then I got a friend that's a chemist that lives down the street, and he starts telling me all this stuff, and then I'm like, okay, I'm going to do an experiment with it. And I had no idea there were so many different kinds of alcohol that had so many different properties.
Yep, I don't know any difference either, other than the way they taste.
Well, I can tell you definitely do not want to drink the isopropanol. That is not a good outcome.
No.
Well, so Matt is interactive, but I haven't heard anything out of Stacy and Keith, so I'm wondering if the two of them sort of slipped into a coma from boredom.
No, I'm still here, just driving. So listening in and enjoying the conversation.
Meow. Meow.
All right, looks like we're out of stuff to talk about. You guys ready to head out for the day? Because once I click this button, it's all over.
I'm good.
All right. See y'all tomorrow.